everybody, let's hang out in Scottsdale, Arizona. Join Pete and me at the 2024 Bulletproof Summit at the beautiful JW Marriott Camelback in Scottsdale. Immerse yourself in innovation and inspiration. Unite and strengthen your team and earn 16 CE credits. That's June 14th and 15th. Register at bulletproofsummit.com. We can't wait to connect with you and your entire team. See you soon, guys. Paul, remember when Peter and I were going to the Breakers Hotel in Palm Beach, and we had a plan, and I told you about it. You're like, hey, like next week, I'm there. Remember? And we all hung out together.
Yeah, that was awesome. That was a really great time.
Well, that was fun. We had all the families there.
That was way back when, Craig. You just took us back in the way back time machine.
When was that? That was obviously pre-COVID.
That was 2017, 18, somewhere around there.
Yeah, so we've known each other a really long freaking time. Like, how long ago does that go? When you and Coachman came to my office, and that was like, what, 15, 16?
Yeah, that was 2016. I had just become the CEO of DSD at the time.
I remember that.
And then prior to that, I was doing a lecture in Maine, and you were there as well.
Oh my God, that was the best time ever.
And we
was where Paul and I fell in love. That's the beginning of the bromance.
So, Craig, introduce our guest listener for today, please.
So, we're very honored to have Paul Vigario, CEO of SurfCT, an all-around badass technologist, and we're just going to have an open conversation about what's happening in dentistry. But I did want to take a trip. I didn't want to go down memory lane.
But I liked
When was the main lecture? When was the main lecture? I got to pull out my phone here.
The main lecture, I think, was like 2014 or 15. It was like before. So I think we've known each other for over 10 years or about 10 years.
So that night, we lectured for, what was it, Seattle Study Club, Casco Bay Study Club, I think.
Yeah, Casco Bay.
So Paul and I were on stage together, just lecturing, met, and then we went for a big night out in Maine, in Portland, Maine.
Yeah.
Drinks were flowing, and we had a great time.
Was this in the summer?
Yeah, it was a summer trip. It was a
I want
summer
to go
trip.
to
It was
Maine
beautiful
in the
out. Paul and I were staying at Peter's house, and Peter lives right on the Casco Bay. It was beautiful. You were going through a really rough time, Paul, which we won't talk about now, but we just kind of were, you become friendly, or you become more deep friends with people when one person is going through a personal thing. You know what I mean? And that was, Paul, you don't have to share about it, but that was
it was a vulnerable time. I think when you share vulnerability, right? We're all humans and we all go through different times, and we're living in this world where, like, on Instagram, everything is perfect. And that was a time in my life that things weren't perfect, and so it was a very vulnerable time. But I created a lot of deep bonds just by being transparent and authentic during that time. So
yeah, you did. And I was meeting you in that dark time. So I didn't know, is this like his MO? But now that I've known you for over a decade, I could see what an aberrant time that was for you. Because you're a type of person, you roll with it, and you're always moving forward. You're always making forward progress. And you'd really, knock on wood, don't have bad days. So when I've seen you at touch points throughout the last decade, once or twice or 4 times a year to whatever it is, it's never been a dark time like that. So it just goes to show me, in the full scope of our relationship, that was just a tough road. And then I went through some crazy stuff afterwards, and I was reaching back out to you. But it's good to have you here, Paul, and just to kind of refresh my memory and the memory, just to kind of jog of all the experiences we've had. It's been pretty dynamic and crazy.
Yeah, it has been very dynamic. It's been crazy and a lot of fun too. So
yeah, we had a lot of fun. A lot of fun.
So, yeah.
But you're at this point, Paul, you're like an OG in dentistry, and not, you're almost a dentist. You've worked with enough dentists, and you've been in the field for so long that you're like the OGs of the tech. The DSD thing, I'd forgotten about that.
Yeah.
I mean, not only just sorry to cut you, Paul, but not only just tech, but in the connections you brought. Remember with that lunch with Rafa Puglisi in Miami? Like, what a special time that was, and and just the breadth of experience, not only in technology and the differences of dentistry, but in the connections you have. It's crazy.
Paul, you're speaking at the summit, which I can't wait, because I've heard you speak, and you're a dynamic speaker, and you definitely bring it. And your shoe game is always on point with your suits. So
thank you.
I can't wait to see. No pressure. But what are you going to be talking about at Summit?
I'm going to be talking about thinking outside the box, right?
Oh.
Dentistry is just such a beautiful industry. And to what Craig just shared, it's been an amazing experience all around. And dentistry is a huge industry. I mean, it's huge. It's a $200 billion industry. And when I ask doctors if they know how big their industry is, a lot of them don't realize it's a $200 billion industry. It's bigger than the NFL, NBA, Major League Baseball, and F1 combined.
Well, Paul, some doctors don't know how big their own
crazy.
practice is, though.
Say that again. It's bigger than the
NFL, the NBA, Major League Baseball, and F1 combined.
No freaking way when you say it that way.
So I was in Miami.
Like if you would have asked me, is it bigger than F1 Global?
I would have said no chance.
I would have said no chance.
Yeah.
If you would have said, is it bigger than the NBA? No chance. Are you sure about that?
Paul, I'm going to have to fact check you on this.
You got to fact check that.
I'm going to ask ChatGPT.
You could run that fact check. You could run that fact check.
I'm going to ask.
No, I love it. I just can't understand it.
Craig, will you ask ChatGPT real quick?
Yeah, I have the numbers on it. Let's right
fact
here.
Fact check our guest.
I'll bring it up. Please do fact check me on that.
Well, Paul, look,
and a lot of doctors aren't aware of that too. So I think that's the big thing. So go ahead, Pete. Go ahead.
So why does it matter? Why would a dentist care about that? Right?
Well, because when you understand how big the industry is, and by the way, on my side here, we got F1, 15 billion. We got the NFL. Roger Goodell hopes it's going to be 25 billion by 2027. We got the NBA at 11 billion. And why it matters is because when you understand how big this industry is, you start to understand, what its potential is and the opportunity. And with that level of business, there comes a huge amount of desire for control over this industry. And that's why doctors, in my view, aren't getting the information that they need, is because with this size of the industry, these companies that are behind it, they don't serve the doctor. They serve their shareholders.
Say more, Paul. Keep going. Say more.
Yeah, they're publicly traded. They're publicly traded companies, and they have a fiduciary duty to their shareholders, not their doctors, not their teams. And when you start to really understand how this industry works, it's a beautiful industry, but peeling back the curtain on its size and understanding the level of control, you could start to really develop a practice that works for you and that works for your life. Because right now, if you look at a dentist's life right now, one of the most exciting days is that day that they do a startup. And I go like that because I don't even know what that means. Like everybody's like, oh, I could help you with a startup. Like startup what? Startup paying more bills? Like you go to school, you pay your dues. You become a resident, you pay your dues. You get out of school, you're paying your dues. And now you're going to do a startup. And if you follow that formula that's pre-canned, your next most exciting day, if you look at the career of a dentist that's been practicing for 20, 30, 40 years, is the day they sell.
Don't sell it, Paul. Don't say it. Damn it.
Yeah, but there's something wrong with that. If you build a business for 20, 30, 40 years, there's something wrong with that.
You make it just like a boat.
Let him finish. Let him finish.
The most happy day is buying a boat. The second happiest day for the boat owner is selling the boat. You just made the boat analogy.
It is, because you start to connect these dots. And when I say everything is connected, people think I'm talking about just technology. Yeah. But I'm talking about really understanding the industry and the game that's being played. And if you can get out of like, I'm just going to build a startup under, under these rules, which really you end up, just taking out more loans, more debt. And now you've created yourself a box to work in, a prison to report to. But
you built yourself a job is what you're really saying.
Right. Under the false tense of you have like some ownership of something. Like,
there's a narrative in the industry saying like, own your own practice, and here's 120% financing and 0% interest, and buy these chairs and buy this mill and buy that and buy. And all of a sudden you're like, you've made it, air quotes for those not watching, and you realize, oh damn, like if I injured my wrist, if I slip and fall, if I want to go on a 2-week vacation, this thing stops. So so that's not a business though. That's not a
Where
business,
were you going with that though, Paul? Was it the direction Craig just took you, or you started that with, hey, this industry is a $200 billion filet mignon on the table full of dogs kind of thing, right? There's prey people all around it, and be careful
careful. Like, so I'll share this. So I was recently having tea with a CEO of a Fortune 500 company.
Okay.
And I started showing them him and the team, how we can build practices a different way, a more efficient way, but in a way that serves the doctor. And we showed him how these practices would, in the first 18 to 24 months, be able to generate north of $3 million a year in revenue, not be stuck at that 1 or 2 that so many people are stuck at. And I made some comment of like, and I showed example after example, and I said, isn't this better? And I was probably a little naive. I was so excited. And the response I got was, better for who? Better for who? And I said, isn't this better for the doctor? And the next response I got was, well, we know that if a doctor can generate that kind of revenue, they can start to have more options.
They can open their own practice.
They can start to do their own. Yeah, they have more options. They you know, and then, you know, some of these companies want you to rely on us. I mean, that's literally like some of their models is rely on us. Just like process that for 1 second.
Help me understand where you're going with this.
I know exactly where he's going.
Yeah. Well,
did you go to school for this long to like rely on other people? Like,
is it, so what you're saying is the CEO is saying what specifically? He's saying
it's an existential threat.
I'm saying this understanding. I'm saying this understanding that corporate publicly traded companies are not working for the doctor. They're working for the shareholder. And when the industry is worth $200 billion, there are a lot of interests at stake. And from what I've seen in the course of the last 23 years in this industry, it's a beautiful industry, but it's not designed to serve the doctor. It's designed to have the doctor serve the industry. Because in that 30-year career of a doctor, when he sells his practice, he's excited. I always say, how high did his stock go up? Yeah, you had a good living. You're a doctor. You're going to make a good living. But how high did your stock go up? And did you look at the stock of the industry over the last 20 or 30 years? It's so I'm saying, you know, stop being the tail and start being the dog, because as doctors, you guys have huge earning potential. And the industry this size wants to keep a lot of that information at bay from you to keep you on track to increase their stock, not yours.
So when you said to this CEO, was he a dental CEO? Of course, we won't out him.
It was in the UK too. You know, I know that.
Well, no, I'm just saying
the whole tea thing.
Was it? Yeah, good deduction there, Sprocket. What was it? So let's just say it's a dental CEO feels this way. You were excited because you faced the dentist. Your most of your day faces the dentist, providing a dentist unique solutions and help. And so you're excited, like, hey, I got something that can help the dentist. And like, what are you talking about? We don't really care. That's a very profound thing. And that fits what is going on, because the narrative that's coming from every big organization in dental is do it on your own, be beholden, here's 110% financing at 8%, sign your life away. Here's the milling machine. Here's the Acme laser, buy. And then the salespeople will actually have the balls to tell you, don't worry, you just do 1 crown of paste for itself. Bullshit. You don't keep 100% of the revenue of a crown. You're lucky if you keep 8 or 20% of the revenue of the procedure. So I see, and Peter and I have the, opportunity to interface with dentists that have done what the industry told them to do. Now they're 45 and they're like, holy shit, I'm hopeless. I'm helpless. I don't know where to go. We're leading the pack in suicide, depression, divorce, drug abuse, you name it. You look at the chats on Facebook, and I go deep on them. There's a lot of dentists that like, what the F did I get myself into? And it's an honest conversation to say, what part did the big businesses have to play in it?
A huge part, because that's where you guys are getting the information from. And I always say, like, where is the source of your information coming from? Where are you getting this? So I have a couple in Chicago, husband and wife team, and they've been practicing for 8 years and they couldn't break 1.5 million. And so the husband is looking at building a new practice, and a friend of his from Toronto called him and said, you got to meet Paul, you got to meet Surf. So we build this practice, and at month 16, the practice is trending towards $3 million a year. And he can't believe it. He just can't believe it. And basically 2 years after being open, they sold the wife's practice that no matter what, they just couldn't break 1.2, 1.4. And they had worked there for 8 years. And what's interesting is that when you break 3 million in revenue, these corporations know that you get more options in life. You get more opportunity. So whether it's 3 million,
go into
6
that.
million,
I want to hear, because what's the nefarious, why would it hurt the corporations, the big powers in dentistry, for the doctor to go from 1 to 3 because they're going to buy more cotton rolls. They're going to buy more blank and more blank. So help me understand why.
Because at that, I don't know exactly because I don't operate in that world.
Well, let's just put a conspiracy theory hats on.
No, I wouldn't even put a conspiracy theory on. I'll just take the slogan that's used. The slogan that's used is rely on us, right? And so something tells me if you have enough, revenue coming through, you won't have to rely on anybody. I mean, just process that for a second. Like as you gain more revenue, more options open up for you, right?
You still can't go by. There's a lot of things that are withheld through supply chain, though, that you can't completely kind of go on your own path. There's licensed dealers. Like you can't buy a lot of products off the market. You have to,
and that's changing. That's changing. So I think you're going to see that change. But I think that the idea that, with that type of revenue, you can hire someone internally to, price shop things a little bit and look at
procurement
Amazon.
for sure. Procurement for sure.
Right?
I know that like in the DSO space, no supplier is looking to get that business because the DSOs are shrewd and they compress the margins so tight. People are like, we can't serve you. So I know once you start to that level, you have a lot of options for procurement. I mean,
but
the
just in
liner
general,
companies.
just think let's forget the dental thing for a second. Just think as like a small business owner or as an entrepreneur. As your revenue increases, if you're doing it the right way, it tends to open up more possibilities. I mean, over the course of my career, I've met more dynamic people, smarter people. And what I would say is the probability of the blinders coming off is probably pretty significant. And I think, with a $200 billion industry and 300,000 dentists in the US, I'd say, good 90% of them, maybe 85% have blinders on. They're just following this path they were told that's the way it's supposed to be. And how do I know that? You meet a young dentist and they start talking to you about CBCT machines, but they don't know how to place an implant. And just to give you like a cross reference, I work with Dr. Michael Appa. He's a client of mine for a long time. And Mike
is he a dentist? I'm sorry. I'm joking.
Right. Yeah. But Mike got his first CBCT machine like 6 years ago. It wasn't, when he started, it wasn't 20 years ago. It was when he needed it. And this idea that, the fact that I get the same questions from these doctors at trade shows or when I talk to them just tells me that they're getting the wrong information, right? You gotta, quite frankly, start thinking a little bit more in depth and ask better questions.
Well, that or Paul, make data-driven decisions, right? Like, a lot of us just have made gut decisions with, well, like I can justify going to this course or buying this tech or building this office, and there's no data to back up the fact that it's a gut feeling, not a data-driven decision. And that's what I always contend, even in our masterminds a lot, is don't make decisions from your gut, because my gut has been good and sometimes it's been catastrophic, sometimes in other areas. So I agree. There needs to be more of a decision tree than just, I should get it because I saw it on Instagram kind of thing.
Well, exactly. if we look at what we find with the mastermind and the dentists we interact with, when we first meet them, they actually don't have any idea what their true profit is. So what's typical, Paul, and I'm sure you know this because you roll up your sleeves and get into their dental businesses, when they actually pay themselves a replacement wage, let's say 32% of their production, their bottom line is oftentimes negative. So for the pleasure of owning their business, they're actually losing money, mostly. Again, I'm taking a high level view here, but that's the state of the union for dentistry. So, and we have this over and over, like, we don't understand what you mean. What do you mean? My overhead's only 40%. I'm like, no, because you don't pay yourself. So if all of SurfCT's employees, and I'm sure you've got hundreds, all decided tomorrow to work for free, imagine what the profit of SurfCT would be like. Even better.
Sure. Yeah.
Paul, so they don't know. So that's where the gut comes in.
Okay. So we talked about, the people on the industry licking their chops. And we see that with private equity. We see it with insurance salesmen. We see it with marketing. We see, dentistry is very vulnerable to being taken advantage of, right? Because of the $200 billion prize that you spoke of. And, and I've always said this, especially with, we are preyed upon because we are trusting people, right? If we like you, we use you kind of thing.
Good people.
Yeah, good people. So what have you solved in right? You started SurfCT with a thesis of being specific in dentistry, but what do you feel like you have solved for the dentist?
So I started SurfCT at the University of Connecticut, and it was 3 questions when I was a junior focusing on healthcare systems. And I focused on healthcare systems because a lot of jobs were going over to India, and I'm a practical person. If you can do it for less in India, why not? But I figured healthcare would stay here. And it was 3 questions. Could a doctor in private practice benefit from having a full-fledged IT company, like dedicated to them? Yes. Question number 2, was it financially feasible for one doctor in private practice to have access to a hospital grade IT department? No. So everybody said, good idea, but not financially feasible. I don't like when money gets in the way of a great idea. I just don't. Like, to me, that's just an excuse. So I went to go work at UConn Health. I worked at Hartford Hospital, and I was super late with my paper, but I basically said, listen, it's a great idea. It doesn't look like it's financially feasible. Here's how you make it a win-win-win for all. And I calculated the break-even cost of number of employees to what you would need for what's called an OSI model, which is 7 layers on how to build a system. Now, that's how the company started in 2003. Fast forward 21 years later, I've been involved in over 12,000 practices worldwide. 12,000. From Mike Apple before people knew who he was to Walmart Health that just closed down their dental division, and I could have told you that was going to happen. And everything in between, where Peter, we connected at your office in Atlanta. I've connected with Craig, in Delray, and having that level of exposure over 2 decades, but having a background on how to build systems, and then understanding how to build a practice that works for the doctor, and how to build a practice that people want to be a part of and want to go to, and watching this industry fight it, because they are the ones that want to control the narrative. Even if there is a better possibility for the doctor, it's been.
What do you mean control the narrative?
There's a narrative in this industry that, you got to buy the latest gadget, and you got to buy the latest gadget, and you got to use it. And as Craig said right in the beginning, he said, hey, if you buy this thing, like, you could pay for it with 1 crown. That's a false narrative. We all know that's not true, right? We all know that's not true. So when you understand that the industry is a $200 billion industry, you understand how powerful it is to control that narrative. And I'm going to tell you right now that it's being controlled by corporate America, and technologies like the one we're using right now. For anyone tuning into the podcast or seeing this on Instagram, these technologies are going to be the great equalizer if we stay authentic. SurfCT's had 4 offers in the last 3 years for purchase. And the reason why they want to purchase is not to propel us forward. It's to shut us up.
Shut you down.
Shut us up. Shut us down. Think about that. So that's why I say, like, do you understand the size of the industry? And do you understand that it's bigger than all those professional sports combined? Because not everybody's a fan of sports or a fan of the NFL or NBA, but everybody, and I mean everybody, has a dentist.
I have a question for you, Paul, just based on what you said. First of all, why did you think Walmart would fail? Just curious why you thought so.
The intention wasn't genuine, and the leadership was lost. And when COVID happened, they actually refocused their entire effort on shots. We were part of those conversations, and I was just watching. It'd be like getting
focus their efforts on what?
Shots, vaccines.
Shots, COVID shots, COVID vaccines.
Oh, the jab. Okay.
Yeah. So it'd be like getting a puppy that has so much potential and just putting it off in the corner and doing nothing with it. So nothing. They just kind of, let it go. And that was after Roe left. You guys know Roe was there.
I do.
And after he left, nobody really grabbed the bull by the horns. And I was in those meetings, and I just saw the lack of authenticity and intentionality behind what they were doing. So I could kind of tell you that was going to fail.
Yeah, I made a lot of assumptions on the Walmart model because I didn't know anything better. But I said, would people go visit a clinic that was in a Walmart that had technology, good technology, and they could get a crown in one visit, or they could get this or that? I said, you know what? There's a good segment of the population that would use it. I think we make it so complex in dentistry to get an appointment and all this friction about FMX and comp exam and photos. And I mean, that's great care. Don't get me wrong. That's what I do. But sometimes you're a really busy executive and your crown popped out. It's 9 p.m. on a Thursday and you're going to pick up like paper towels. And like, if it looked good and it was good technology, I could see there being an interface with a certain section that needed it. So that was my thought.
It's funny that you mentioned that, because when I first went down to Arkansas and they gave me a tour of their first facility that they built, and they had built 6 by the time they brought me down, they were full of technology sold by these corporations, right? I remember walking into the first one and there was 3 Cyrex there, and you could look at the counter and none of them had done anything. Like they were all like the odometer, like on a car, were all brand new. But there was 3 there. They had 2 CBCTs in one practice, and this whole thing was decked out. And I said, why am I here? Why did you guys call me down here? And they said, well, we've done 6 locations and they're all running deep in the red, and some little birdie told us to give you a call. And I said, well, that makes sense, because those corporations did to them what they're doing to doctors. They oversold them on all this stuff they didn't need. And I see that all the time. And it's really tragic. And it's unnecessary.
Paul, you just said something. They sold them stuff that dentists don't need. And that was actually my next question. I wrote here, what do you think? Okay. So before I ask you, what do you believe dentistry needs? What do you think the future 5 years looks like? If you had to put on your best guess or best educated guess of what do you think happens in 5 years? I want you to talk about consolidation. I want to talk to you about rising student debt. I want you to comment about the future economic viability of dentists coming out of school, the competition.
I think it's like Mr. Miyagi in Karate Kid. And Mr. Miyagi in Karate Kid said, Daniel-san, karate no, okay. Karate yes, okay. Karate maybe so, squish like bug, right? So I think you're going to see 2 things. I think you're going to see 2 things happen in dentistry. You're going to see this huge corporate growth that you're seeing, and it's going to be that path. And then you're going to see
before you go on, does that segment of the market accelerate and get larger, or it just continues its trajectory?
It naturally accelerates. It continues its trajectory, but just based on its sheer mass, it's going to have more gravitational pull. So naturally, yeah. So that's that. And then you're going to have these doctors that do think outside the box, and they do hear this podcast and they reach out and we connect and we have a sophisticated conversation, and they start to realize that they don't have to buy all of this unnecessary stuff, because what you need to do is build a brand that stands for something that people want to get behind, that the community wants. And then you implement systems that power that brand. So you're going to have this entrepreneurial doctor that will do very well. And then you're going to have these corporations that will expand, and their gravitational pull will grow from that matter. But this idea of being in the middle, or these startups, I think they're in really big trouble. And I'm seeing it already. I'm already seeing startups fail at a higher rate than ever before, because they weren't positioned properly. And by the way, these offices are being built the same way they were in the 1990s, these massive front desks, the same exact layout, but yet the technology is completely different. In the 90s, we used to go through a toll, and my dad would stop at the toll and pay a person, and that person would be miserable. And I would not understand why they were so miserable,
went to
but they were.
Blockbuster to rent movies.
Right.
Yeah.
And today you drive by that toll at 75 miles an hour, your car's an autopilot, and there's no HR, and there's no miserable people
watching
there.
Netflix in the car.
So let me ask you something. So obviously dental offices are being built the same way, but you're saying that the chances of just a whipped together startup today versus the 90s is more precarious. Is that because they also buy $200,000 worth of technology? So the barrier.
If you're building a startup and you have a publicly traded company giving you advice or giving you knowledge, you're in big trouble, because they don't want to.
Because you're going to overbuy, is what you're saying.
They're going to overbuy, but they're building these things the way they did in the 1990s. And when I show them a better way, they don't want to empower you, and they don't want to retool their massive, infrastructure that they have. So think about it. That's like going to someone to build a toll, and they're building you tolls with the port that goes down, and they're or building a town, and they're building you a Blockbuster, and they're putting all this infrastructure that they can sell you. They can sell you this. I can sell you the gate. I can sell you the little hut that the person lives in. I can sell you the Blockbuster. I can sell you all this. But at the end of the day, you're supposed to compete. You're supposed to compete against what's actually possible. So that's why when we build practices, they absolutely crush it. And that like lights me up. And so what Peter said, what have we solved? We are independently owned, and we have operated for over 20 years in 12,000 different helped 12,000 different practices worldwide. And there is a certain understanding that comes from this. Imagine taking the test over and over and over and over again, and having all the answers to the test. And I'll give you a little quick analogy. My friend, a good friend of mine, is a brain surgeon at Yale New Haven Hospital, and we were having lunch the other day. And he says, Paul, help me explain this. Like, explain this to me. And I said, sure, what's going on? And he said, I'm 42 years old. I'm in great shape. I mean, this guy looks like Brad Pitt too. He's like, I run marathons. I'm a brain surgeon. And every time I get home, my 8-year-old smokes me in Halo. Absolutely smokes me. He's not smarter than me. He doesn't have more wisdom than me. And I said, John, welcome to business. And he said, what do you mean? And I said, welcome to business. Your 8-year-old is playing Halo all day because your opportunity cost to play that game is too high. You're a brain surgeon. But what your 8-year-old can do that you can't do is he can anticipate what's next. He can stay one move ahead and anticipate. And what we've done as an independent company is we've been able to see this unfold over 12,000 times. We could anticipate what's actually best for that doctor, depending on what vision they have for their life. And it's not the same thing over and over.
You spoke on something, just touched it right there, the vision. The people that you're mentioning, Appa and others, had a very unique driving vision. I think what's missing in dentistry is people don't understand what that means. People don't understand that the dental practice that they could create is limitless. A company like you or a company like yours, or even you could say, what do you want to create? Well, I really just want to work 3 days a week and I want to see this type of patient, this type of patient. What most dentists wind up doing is literally hijacking someone else's vision. I want to create what Peter created,
right?
Not knowing why Peter wanted it. And it's not, I'm not saying copy like plagiarize. It's just you're going to create something that you're not going to be happy with. It has to be what you want. And that's the beautiful thing about dentistry. It can accommodate what you want. And that's what we focus on the summits. And people don't want to do it. They just want the reward of it. They never want to go through the exercise. I don't know if you find that to be so in your experience.
Yeah, it's so true. So we have a vision questionnaire that we give anyone who's looking to work with us. And sometimes we'll have clients that have worked with us and we'll give to them. And I recently gave it to someone who was about 20 years into their career. And she turned to me and she said, nobody has ever asked me these questions. And I said, well, what do you think? Like, what do you think about that? She goes, if someone had asked me these questions before I built the practice, I think I'd be in a very different place today.
Of course
and it was like, she was like emotional about it and almost like, I wouldn't say sad, but like, it was like this moment of realization. And then I just had another instance, and this happens every day, where clients will reach out and say, hey, I saw what you did for so-and-so and so-and-so. And I always think like that's an inspiration, right? What I did for this person or with this person, that's an inspiration. So what we'll do is we'll send them a vision questionnaire and they will either not respond to it or they'll write, just do for me what you did for this person. And that's their answer. And we will not go any further. We'll actually say, listen, if you can't really sit down, and we can coach you through it, we can show you what's possible, we can open up your eyes, but if you can't really go through this exercise, then we can't work together.
Well, you're going to fail, Paul, because at the end of the day, what they wanted you to do is create something for them that they thought would work for them. And if you have, like I've told this example numerous times in the pod, but just for your own ears, people will say, I want what you have. And I say, why? And the most common answer is, well, I want to make money when I'm not there. So if they ever come to visit what I've got like 60 people running around a box, and I love it because I'm an extrovert. I love being surrounded by people. And when they see that if they're introverted or they don't like it, it's going to be absolute misery for them. So our goal, because we're on the same end of this cause, is to help dentists improve their lives. And if we don't ask the right questions and we just copy and paste someone else's shit, it's going to make them really unhappy. And then we're kind of part of that saga of making them unhappy. But the vision is where the scarcity is, unfortunately.
Yeah. And we have that role. And if they can't answer that, and I just had a doc from LA just say, well, listen, I got a $200,000 budget. I'm ready to cut you a check. And we were like, we don't care. You can go give that to corporate. They'll take it from you. I was like, we need to create something that's in alignment, right? And we actually know what that recipe is. If you have your vision and the design is in aligned with the vision, the technology, and the treatment philosophy. So vision, design, technology, treatment philosophy, only then can you create your brand. If you align those first things, you can then create your brand. And if you do that properly, you'll create a brand that patients want and that doctors want to be part of. And that's a beautiful thing.
I want to double click on the treatment philosophy thing, because I think people may hear that and hear good and bad, good treatment, bad treatment. And there's nuance to that. You can come to a conclusion that dentistry needs a walk-in clinic. It's just simple stuff. It gets people out of pain. It's not comprehensive dentistry. And guess what? Our communities need that. So it's not like good comprehensive FMR Friday and then shit. It's just what issue are you trying to solve for the community? And a walk-in clinic that has a really good vision, it's open 21 hours a day or 24 hours a day. There's a need for that. And there's a lot of cosmetic dentists that would actually be really happy to have you in their community, because you could, and they could work something out with you. But it doesn't necessarily just mean good, high quality and low quality dentistry.
No, it's all different things. It's all different things. We've done aligner only practices that way.
Sure.
We've done light dentistry that way, which is you go in, you get a cleaning, you get some teeth whitening, you're happy. So it's really a matter of creating alignment from the beginning of what your vision is, like what you want your ultimate outcome to be. And if you can design that ahead of time, you can get much closer to success.
And I hope that opens up people's eyes to what's possible. Just hearing that you could have it your way. You can do exactly what you want.
Oh, and here's the thing. It's actually, it's not about that, but it's actually more affordable to do it as well, because you're not spending dollars in the wrong direction. You're not, it's really, really interesting. And what the corporations have done pretty well is they've created this narrative that we're expensive to work with. And doctors that have worked with us are like, oh my God, like it is the furthest thing from the truth, because we built what we were supposed to build and did it for, this amount. I got a guy right now who had a $4 million quote to build this mega center. And we ended up working with them and getting it down in the 2.8 range. And it wasn't because we were trying to cut corners. It was because we actually built what he wanted versus built what I walked into Arkansas and saw, which was, 3 CRX, 2 CBCTs, and a lot of technology that was going nowhere fast.
So sorry, Peter, you go ahead.
Go ahead.
So help me understand, because Peter and I have been sitting for, almost a decade trying to figure out what dentistry needs. And we've spent a lot of brain power and we have a lot of documents trying to work some things out. But I'd love to hear from your perspective. I know you're going to say, that needs the things we've talked about, but holistically, what do you think will save dentistry? What do you think will save the dentist? What's going to happen?
Well, first, I got to ask, who are we trying to save? So when you say that, I think dentistry will inherently save itself, because we all have teeth and the population goes up, and we care more about oral health now than we ever have. And I think that's just increasing.
So let me clarify. When you say
that, I think it's important
to understand,
clarify that.
Who will save the dentist?
Only the dentist himself can save the dentist. You cannot rely on outside people to save you.
Yeah, no one's coming to save you. So what I look at, and I don't want to be dark, but I look at, student loans and average salary of dentists compressing. We know consolidation is going to speed up. So the dentist becomes the commodity, the replaceable asset in the whole
dentistry.
thing.
And let me just be very clear. Dentistry, like a cup of coffee, is a commodity. You go on Main Street, you can stop at, half a dozen dental practices, if not a full dozen. So if you build a brand and turn that commodity into a blue ocean, and you create demand for what you have, now you're not a commodity anymore. So if you think about it, like coffee shops, you can get coffee at any gas station. But yet on Sunday morning, if your wife says, honey, get me a caramel frappuccino, and you come back with a 99-cent cup of coffee from the Shell gas station, you're not going to have a great Sunday. I can tell you that. But
where were you on Mother's Day? Damn it.
Yeah, but you'll go into a Starbucks and you'll say, and this is very important, you'll say, I want a caramel frappuccino. Or what would you like? They say, what would you like? And you'll say a caramel frappuccino. And essentially that's a $7 cup of coffee. Now tell your grandparents that, and they'll say, you're crazy. Why? Like, it makes no sense. When I was at UConn, one of the projects I had was, will people ever pay for radio? Will people ever pay for radio? And I wrote that, yeah, if you have the right OSI model, you have the right principles baked into the package, people will 100% pay for radio. And at the time, my marketing professor gave me a C- on that. He said, no, because society's so baked on that. Radio's a commodity. He said, radio's a commodity. And I didn't do well with that paper. But today, and by the way, I looked him up on LinkedIn. He's retired. I didn't want to bother him. But today, people pay for radio all the time, right? You get paid for Spotify, you pay for XM Sirius, Apple, whatever it is that you do. So we all pay for radio today. So understanding that dentistry commodity is a good start. And then understanding how to create your blue ocean and how to build a system to actually create that desire in other people so that they want to pay for radio. They want to, they want a caramel frappuccino. It's that creating the want that is going to, the experience.
But look at
you
the,
can create
look
the
at the
experience
bar.
and not know, you can create the experience and not know how to create the want. And then you're stuck with this beautiful startup practice. Everybody's ready to go, but nobody's walking through the door. So
right, but look at the hurdle we have to create now. So the 90s, you could just have your dental degree and kill it. Now the hurdle to become viable is higher. You know, the fact that all these other services and technology and vision, people
yes and
need
no.
to have.
Yes and no. So I would say yes and no with that. So if you're listening to the narrative of the $200 billion industry, then yeah, it's much higher like hurdle to run. But if you're just asking smarter questions, if you just have, someone asked me the other day what I thought success was, and it was very easy for me. I said, success is awareness. Because if you have awareness, then you can have success. Success is awareness. You're not successful when you're not aware. If you could just be aware of the size of the industry.
Sometimes I think being unaware, you could be successful. Like ignorance is bliss.
Well, you're talking about ignorance is bliss. And so that could be.
Well, you're successful until you realize like, oh my God, look at that kid. That kid just graduated 5 years ago.
Now you're comparing. Yeah, that's a solution for if you start comparing, that's a solution for non-happiness. But if you start to ask better questions and you have awareness of what's possible, I would make a very strong case that the hurdle for extraordinary success has never been lower. And I was lecturing at Columbia 2 months ago, and this kid raised his hand and he said, I went on YouTube and I searched SurfCT on YouTube, and I saw this video, SurfCT APA, and it's you and Mike in 2017 in Vegas, and he's talking about how you guys flew Delta over to Vegas. And I said, okay, so what's your point? And he goes, well, that was 2017. I mean, we're in 2023. That was 6 years ago. And I was like, okay, so what's your point? And I was letting him make his point. He goes, my dad's been practicing for over 20 years. And like, none of that's happened. And I would say that, his dad is practicing in a box and is listening to the industry and doesn't have awareness. And when, I work with doctors like Mike or doctors like yourselves, there's a lot more awareness of what's possible. And it's in connecting those dots and having a vision that you can create. So I would say that if you're trying to go I'm just going to start up practice and see what happens, you're going to make the industry rich and build yourself a prison or a box to work in. But if you start to ask better questions, just start to ask better questions, which by the way is the cover of the Harvard Business Review this month. Ask smarter questions. And when I read this, it really resonates with me about the industry. Ask smarter questions. If you start to do that, and then you start to apply the technologies that exist. So I was just at a big board meeting for a new dental school that's opening up. And there was a lot of big people there. Rick Workman from Heartland was there. There was some people from Align there. And somebody asked what was the number one dental technology that has come about for dentists. And everybody kind of went and spoke. And, and at the end, I pulled out the piece of technology from my phone and I said, here it is. This is the number one piece of dental technology that's available, because this allows listeners to be listening to this podcast, allows us to connect from New York, Atlanta, Miami, allows us to connect from all over the world. And so if you're doing things a traditional way, if you're building tolls or coffee shops a traditional way, I agree. The hurdle is much, much higher. But if you are actually asking smarter questions, the hurdle for extraordinary success has never been more achievable than it is today. I know that for a fact.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I just think like your Miyagi analogy, the top, good karate is going to be great. But I look at averages, and I know no one listening. Listen, there's a lot of people that are listening to this right now, and they're in dental school, and they have no idea. Are they going to be average? Are they going to be above average? What do they have? You don't know you're special until you go into the arena. And I look at the flattening of dental salaries, and it just bothers me. And I had the ADA president and cost of education, and we're looking at AI and different ways to monetize your options. It just feels as though, and again, I'm sorry to admit this, and I'd love for you to push back on this. It feels as though the dental opportunities are flattening for the masses.
If you're listening, let me ask you a question. Do you think that the ADA serves dentists?
Do I believe they actually serve dentists?
Yes.
No, not whatsoever. Not whatsoever.
Okay, so
and I gave them an opportunity, and I went through their website, and I know they can get us 15% off our car insurance and blah, blah, blah. But no, do they serve dentists? No. We saw that in COVID. You had chiropractors being able to, be mid-level providers and, providing injections or whatever. Not to say, but we inject every day, and we were not even allowed.
I would tell you that what you're feeling is accurate when you're surrounded by the industry like that. If you're surrounded by information from the ADA, if you're surrounding yourself with industry, what you're feeling is accurate. I could also tell you just as equally, what I'm telling you is very accurate, that when you surround yourself with people that are absolutely going to extraordinary, that stuff starts to rub off. And dentistry has that potential. If it didn't have that potential, it wouldn't be a $200 billion industry. But what's really wild is that when I lecture, and I was in San Diego lecturing in front of 400 doctors, and I expressed the size of the NBA, the size of the NFL, which Roger Goodell wants to be worth $25 billion in the next 2 years. And I said, how big do you think dentistry is? There was this older doctor in the front that started chuckling. And I said, why are you chuckling? And he goes, I can't. He goes, just keep going. Just keep going. I said, no, why are you chuckling? He goes, I can't imagine how small it is. And when I shared the $200 billion number, I had the same thing. They were like, we got to fact check that. I go ahead and fact check that. But I think it's odd. I think it's odd that information is kept from dentists. Like, I think it's odd that a lot of dentists don't actually know that. And what I'm saying is, if you're surrounding yourself with the ADA or with these organizations that are supposedly helping dentists, but we all know that they're not, you're going to feel that way. But the potential in dentistry is amazing.
I don't feel that way, Paul. Because I've learned enough to ask questions that are different. But I know what I know what the dentists are feeling, and that's disappointing for me. The podcast is great. We'll reach thousands of people.
Well, that's why they got to come out to Scottsdale. I mean,
right,
look,
exactly.
June 14th, I'm going to be talking about outside the box in Scottsdale. And anyone listening to this, you got to come out. You got to come out.
You got to bring your team too, because at the end of the day, when you hear it, you get all excited. You go back on Monday morning, your team's just like, oh, I've heard Dr. Jones like this before. It was, this lecture, but track education is knowledge is not power. Execution is power. And if you hear it alone, you don't have your team with you, it's going to be hard to implement this stuff. Bring your key people. Absolutely do that.
I want to go back to something before we jump off on like closing remarks. Because that was really good, Paul. I don't think I've ever done a pod where I've listened so much. Craig can attest to that. You had mentioned that, going back to your toll booth analogy, right? Like, roads were built in a different way, and we're still building dental offices like we were in the 1980s, and that is largely driven by the free floor plans we get from the publicly traded company, the Pattersons, the Shines, whatever, right? and everyone's like, well, they do it for free. I'm like, well, yeah, it's pretty costly at the end of the day. If you get something that A, is not ergonomically designed, and B, is not aesthetically pleasing, it's very functional to fit as much of the equipment in that as possible. So my question is this. You said something about like giant reception desks. Well, how have you seen the trend over time in offices that are done correctly? Or better yet, like how have you modified your design from the 1980s to how now you're advocating for them to be built now?
Sure. So I'm advocating that for them to be built to serve the doctor, and that's the doctor's vision. So it really depends on what the doctor is trying to accomplish. But we're designing offices that don't have front desks at all, like zero front desks. So human capital is the most expensive, expenditure. No front desk. And what we found with that is, I went to go visit this endodontic office, and there was as soon as I walked in, there was a guy complaining about his copay, and he was a fire marshal. And then when he sat down, the lady got up and said, "Am I going to have a copay?" And I just watched this being fabricated.
Cascade of events.
Yeah, it's like I felt like I was there to visit the doctor. I felt like being like, "Hey guys, since I'm here, can you look into my copay too?"
Yeah.
And we eliminated that entire front desk. There's no front desk. You walk in, it's a lounge now, and there's no front desk. And suddenly you go from needing 3 or 4 people at the front to having a hostess who will bring you out a beverage and start the reciprocity process, because these offices need to go through a sequence. So I know that if we do 6 things to another human being, they will want what we have. And this isn't just me. This is Robert Cialdini.
Cialdini,
yeah. So these offices, you can
the
create
law of persuasion, or
you can bake that law right into the design. So all of that actually comes alive with very little human capital. So the idea of
we have a document that we give at Summit, which I know you haven't seen, but it actually is part of our Bulletproof manual, which is getting patients to say yes, which was based on the principles of Cialdini, which is the law of reciprocity, right? Like creating scarcity, those kind of things, right?
So
creating specialness.
I studied with Robert directly. He was a professor of mine, and he went over all of these laws with me. And I kept saying, I could design this into like a building. Because the part of me that I thought was challenging about that was like what you guys are talking about, right? So you come and you understand that, and then you've got to like train your team on understanding that. And then they have to do it. And there has to be a level of repetition and consistency to do it. And that's where humans kind of fall apart, because you do it for a little while, then your numbers look good, and then you stop doing it, and then your numbers go down. And so
and then you revert back to, well, this worked before. Then you build your reception area back, and you just default to what you knew, right?
And we actually design those principles into that immediate space when you get into a practice. So by the time you're sitting in that chair, there's only 1 or 2 principles that you need left. And doctors are pretty good at the authority thing, because you guys come in as doctors, but the reciprocity, the liking, the community, the consensus, the commitment, all of that should happen within the first 5 minutes of joining a practice, so that you get that feeling that you have arrived and this is where you belong. And as much as you can systematize that, so when you go to Starbucks, it doesn't matter who the barista is. You don't even know. When you go to the practice, it doesn't matter who it just doesn't matter. That's what we try to do with practices. We systematize that, but we do so in a way that's going to carry out.
Yeah, but do you believe that? Okay, so I hear you on the Starbucks experience, right? And we actually had Suleiman Ahmed on the other day and talking about, his vision was the Starbucks of dentistry. And I thought about that one, and I was like, I don't want a relationship with my barista. I actually don't want to know their name and don't care. Like you said, it's a coffee, it's a coffee, it's a coffee. In dentistry, I think what made it so good from a cottage industry standpoint, and the reason it's prevailed as long as it has, I think is because it does have relationships, right? And people do have preferential, that's my hygienist, and I want to go see my assistant, and that's my doctor, right? Coffee, not so much. So I don't want the Starbucks of dentistry. I want the experience-based dental experience based on the providers that they get to see, the environment in which you provide, the dentistry, all that stuff. So what would you say as a counter argument to that?
Yeah, I would say let's get them to arrive at that's what they want sooner. and more efficiently. And I would say that, that's your vision, and I understand that, and I can appreciate that.
Yeah, it's my confirmation bias, right? Because that's the way I built my practices. So I'm listening to you and I'm open. Actually, Trey.
Because what happens there is, like, if you lose that hygienist and that hygienist moves, you see that patient decline, right? And
well, you see that patient, there's attrition that happens because they potentially leave the practice. You're right. So that is a threat to the way that I've built it, right?
Yeah. And what's so interesting about this is that when you systematize this and bake it into the practice, that hygienist will have more success in your space with your design, technology, vision, and treatment philosophy than they will anywhere else. So, you could be a barista at Starbucks, but you walk into a local coffee shop, good luck. The systems aren't there. So it really is the gift that keeps on giving, because suddenly your practice is going 3, 5, 10x in revenue above. The team is thriving. The patients are thriving. And yes, relationships are important. I don't think any of this replaces relationships, but I'll tell you one thing. None of this should be fully dependent on relationships. That's a very tough business to scale.
Well,
relationships are important.
Well, all the things you're saying just serve to improve the relationship. So, a good relationship can trump everything. But if you have all these things and then you bring in the relationship is enhanced. And Peter and I always talk about this. We talk about it at Summit. It's like this pie chart of what is important. It's like everything that's important, and then the dentistry. It's actually not as much the dentistry as everything else. The dentistry has to be good. It has to be clinically acceptable. It has to be delivered in a compassionate, painless environment. But beyond that, everything else is a differentiating factor.
Right.
Paul, when you had mentioned that practice, a husband and wife team you worked with, and you said they were stuck, their ceiling, their glass ceiling was 1.2 and they couldn't break 1.5. And then you basically got referred to them and they broke through that threshold. And succinctly, I guess you have to answer this because we're coming up on, I want to be cognizant of your time. What were some of the changes? Like, what was some of the exciting takeaways from that you implemented immediately that you were like, y'all, this is going to be a breakthrough thing? Can you talk about that?
Yeah. So their first practice was based on relationships, and there's like, that was what it was. And I used to know the number on this. I forgot it because I'm just not a believer in it anymore. But I think a human can only maintain, and I thought it was like 408, or you guys might know the number, but it's
Craig
a pretty
can do
low.
4,008.
Yeah, well, even that, right? Let's say 4,008, right? Like, that's the amount of relationships that you can actually maintain individually. Like, you can't, like,
do more.
People will just fall off, right?
Yeah,
So when docs have those types of practices, I usually say, so how many patients do you actually have? And they don't know the answer to that. Like, they have number of charts, but you don't know how many patients. So the first thing we did is say, hey, this is how you guys have done it. And that's great. And no matter how hard you row, this thing's designed to go, 60 miles an hour. And we're going to build you something that's going to autopilot. And then, not to take away, but then when that relationship is in place, it can grow that much more. So we left the team alone at the first practice. And we didn't mess with that. And we started with a whole new team. But you got that sense that you wanted to be here and that you wanted what they were serving up before you'd even meet the hygienist, or before you even meet anything.
Of course.
And I've done, we just did one in Toronto. We just did a live walkthrough with a bunch of doctors in a new practice. And this doctor from California, without no prepping, she just, in the first 5 minutes, she goes, can I just interrupt this group tour that we're about to have? And I said, sure. And she goes, I just want to be here. Like, I just want whatever. And it was so overwhelming for her. And by the way, she was a huge skeptic. And she's like, well, why do I got to fly to Toronto? And I'm like, because you want to see the latest. We just finished a project there if you want to come see it. And she just said, I don't even know. I want whatever is going on here. And that's because humans are like Cialdini, like he kind of broke it down into the formula. So I think building it on relationships, especially if you've done it, you've validated it. That's a reality. You can do that, but the scalability of that, I think, is a challenge.
That's fascinating. So, I mean, obviously, so you said you're going to talk about some of this stuff at Summit, right? And I think it's always great to bring value to someone, whether or not they're going to be a customer, not like a takeaway, a tangible rubber meets the road. I'm not saying do it now because I want you to save it for Summit, but like, I know you got some pieces of things you're going to say, go home and do this, look at this, analyze this. Cause I really, really resonated with a lot of what you said today, Paul. I think it's, it's great.
So thank you. I'll give doctors something to think about. So often when I go somewhere or I see docs, or I was just at an open house party, they'll come up to me and I'll say, how was your day? And they'll say, I'm really busy. And I'll say, all right, how about we replace the word busy with productive? How productive were you today? And how much of that busy is just absolute noise? Because to me, every single copay conversation is noise. All of that front desk activity is noise. There's a lot of drama that happens in dental practices. And you could eliminate that by the way that they're designed. I remember how moody these people were at the toll gates. I haven't seen a moody person at a toll gate in the last 10 years because we got rid of it. So eliminate noise and ask yourselves, are you busy or are you being productive? That's a big thing.
Great question.
And I think dentists, if they are intellectually honest with themselves, many of them have a need to be both. Busy. They want to be busy. I never want to be busy. I just want to be productive. I don't care how it feels. I care what the results were. But that's asking a better question. A smarter question is, what do you really want? Do you want to be running around, or do you not mind having open time but being more productive?
Paul, are you getting there to the summit a little early, like Craig and I?
Yeah. I'll probably be there. I'll probably be there like a couple of days earlier. So my wife has family in Scottsdale.
Oh, nice.
So we'll be there pretty early.
Yeah, my wife will be there too.
So. Fireside chats of where dentistry's going and how to engineer it correctly from all the Cialdini things and design. I can't wait. I'm actually building an office right now, so I'm highly interested in what you have to say.
Yeah. The best part about it is when it actually gets, goes live and it starts to drive itself. I mean, I'd love to connect with you on that, but I'd love to, get your feedback on. We'll do another episode and you can share with the crowd.
I'm worried to share it with you because then you're going to pick it apart. And like, I'm pot committed right now. So I'm like, shit, Paul's going to be like, why'd you do this?
Why do you do dental chairs, you idiot?
Golly, those things don't
we're
make
suspending
money.
People from the ceiling now. You know that?
Levitating chairs.
Come on, Boomer.
Well, that whole commitment to do this. I mean, no, it's an interesting thing. Like, you could be committed to do it, but if you just take a pause and we do something outside the box, it's going to blow your mind. I can tell you that. It's going to blow your mind.
Sending the plans over now and submit. All right, Paul, can't wait to hang out, bud. Can't wait for our Bulletproof audience to be exposed to you at, on the personal level and in person. And man, I appreciate the time today. Really, really awesome. Good stuff.
Thank
man.
you.
I haven't talked to you in a while. Like, just got to say, this is closing. I haven't talked to you in maybe a couple of years like this. And I was sitting there thinking like, damn, Paul's a smart mother.
Remember in Vancouver, we were all hanging out together. We're at that table. Pete's just like, you know what, Paul? We had like 3 drinks. He's like, Paul, you're the new CEO of Bulletproof. Like, shakes his hand. I like this guy. That was awesome.
All right, thanks.
Hey, thanks for your time today, Paul. We'll see you at Summit, and it's bulletproofsummit.com. Tickets still on sale. Get them today, June 14, 15 in Scottsdale.
See y'all.
Take care, people.